Did you know 1 in 5 Canadians will experience a mental health challenge in their lifetime? Of the remaining 4, they will have someone in their close circle, be it a friend, family member, or colleague, who will. Mercy Canada provides Christ-centered programs that create a safe space for healing and transformation, body, soul, and spirit.
Let your life be transformed. I mean, as cliche as it sounds, I didn't believe that God could totally transform my life, but it's proving to be that He is the only way to have your life transformed.
Just know that on the other side, there is another side. The miracle and the hope that Mercy offers and helps you see, it is so priceless, and you'll never know until you just make that choice and make that decision to come here. Because I promise you, and I guarantee you, if you are willing, there will be a whole entire team cheering on for you and loving you unconditionally, and you're going to experience this peace and joy you have never felt in your whole life.
Good morning, Numa.Church. And thank you to Pastor Nick and for Sarah for inviting us to come and share a little bit with you this morning. I've watched that video, I can't tell you how many times, and countless others of the women that have come through our program, and I'm always in awe of the work that God can do in a life. And we've had so many women that have come through now that actually hold a master's degree in counseling and psychology. Some that are psych nurses that are going into that dark place, into a psych ward for someone that wants to give up and say, there's hope, I've been here. And so I'd just like to share a little bit with you, a little bit about our history, I suppose, to start. And then I'll tell you a little bit about Canada, because we are global. We've been around, we're actually celebrating 40 years globally. And in Canada, 20 years ago, I found myself at a women's conference in South Surrey. I had been working for a church in central Burnaby, running a group home for pregnant teens that were at risk. And 6.5 years into what would be an 8-year journey, I found myself wrestling with God because I'd see these beautiful young women giving birth to these beautiful babies with support and being set up well. And yet within a couple of years, they were back on the streets with drugs, prostitution, gang-related activity, babies being apprehended. And I just called out to God and I just said, I don't get it. What's going on? And part of what struck me when I was at this women's conference was our founder, Nancy Alcorn, who lives in Nashville, Tennessee. She shared 3 principles about this amazing ministry that she'd started 20 years previous. And one was that services would be offered free of charge so that every young woman that walks through the doors knows that she is unconditionally loved and that no one is benefiting from her struggles. And the second one was that there would be no funding taken, government or otherwise, that would restrict sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ fully and entirely. And the last one was, that I hadn't considered, was that 10% of every unrestricted gift that was brought to the ministry would go back out to support other great ministries that have need. And so obviously those 3 are solid principles, and I'd wrestled with the first 2. And when I arrived at this women's conference, with every reason and block in the way why I shouldn't be there, and I heard Nancy speak, it just resonated with me. So my first thought was, I want to work under someone like that. And then my second nudge was, Nicola, you're not finished your assignment. Loyalty, you stay the course, which I did for another 1.5 years until the program that I was a part of, we did receive government funding, and there was a very small fee for service, and so there was barriers for those that were on the streets to come. And with the government funding, we could invite the young women to church, but it couldn't be part of the program, or we couldn't run a Bible study. This is a very long time ago. And so what happened was the program was to close because the government pulled the funding, and there was a change in leadership at the church, and they decided to go in another direction. And so I had, at that conference, a couple of months later, back in the day when we wrote letters, I had written a letter And I stood at a mailbox because I felt God tugging my heart and telling me this was the next step for me. And I stood there with this letter, chicken, full of fear, just wanting to stay in what I knew to do and what was comfortable, but I knew he was calling me to something bigger that was way out of my comfort zone. And so I dropped the letter in the mailbox, and then, okay, I've been obedient, let it go. And then I received a call from the pastor's assistant, who set up a meeting at that very group home where I was at, and we came together because at that conference there was a vision started to bring mercy to Canada. And so the pastor of Relate Church at the time, Helen Burns, had put her hand up, and she met with me and she said, how do we do this? I don't know how to do this. And so I said, well, I could volunteer. I could help you, with what my skill set is. And she gathered a company of powerful women together to make that happen. And so in August of 2010, we opened the doors to a 20-bed residential care home, and we started to support our first group of women. Amazing stories, amazing results. And about 2016, the end of 2016, Fraser Health came in, and we had met with them long before we opened, and we had talked to them about the program, and we didn't need a license at the time because we were opening for adults. And then they let us know that they'd made a mistake and we needed to get a license through Fraser Health. We had pursued an accreditation body that was the same accreditation body that Surrey Memorial Hospital had to prove to the general public that we used best practices and we were professional in all that we did. And so they capped our numbers. And so we realized we were in a phase of development where we'd outgrown this property because we could only have a limited amount of women that we could help. And so backing up in that previous year, being at local churches, I would have older women coming up to me just saying, this is amazing. I wish I could fit your criteria. I'm too old for that. Or I'd have a mom with a younger daughter that was under the age of 19, and we couldn't help her. So we would get resources into their hands, and again, back on the course of crying out to God. And so he just planted a seed. What if, until you find the right property, you start the program and offer it on an outpatient basis? And you build a program to work what you're doing in a different way. Rather than a group going through the same program, tailor it to their individual needs and open up the age range. So we started to do that. And in 2019, we graduated the last few women out, and the few that were left, we sent to the California program. And in 2019, we were ready to start our day program. And then we all know what happened in 2019. There was a pandemic. And so it was, oh God, did we hear you? And sure enough, by the end of 2020, we had gone from 19 women that we helped in 2019 to 52 in 2020, to 73 in 2021, to 106 in 2022, and today we're in 2023 and we've passed 106. So we know that we heard God and we're on the right track. And to say, in the United States, there's 4 amazing residential homes. 2 are 40-bed, one was 30-bed, one was 20, which was the original home. The original home, that September, after we opened in March, that September, what we were seeing was so big that Nancy, our founder, decided to change the original home to a wellness center. And now the United Kingdom, which has had a 20-bed residential home since 2006, they're doing the same thing. So we're excited to see the results and those that we can serve in a variety of different ways. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. First of all, I think I'd like to just share with you Canadian statistics, just to bring it from global to us here. In Canada, more than 51% of Canadian women will endure at least one episode of physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. It will happen again to more than 60% of them. Girls and young women between the ages of 15 and 24 are the most likely victims of sexual assault. 1 in 4 girls has been sexually abused by the time she is 18. 3 in 4 youth, ages 14 to 20, who had ever self-harmed were females, and most began in mid-adolescence. After accidents, suicide is the second leading cause of death for people ages 15 to 34. 1 out of 2 women engage in unhealthy weight control behaviors such as fasting, vomiting, abusing laxatives, skipping meals, or smoking to control appetite. 1 in 10 Canadians 15 years of age and over report symptoms consistent with alcohol or illicit drug dependence. And 1 in 5 Canadians will experience a mental illness in their lifetime. The remaining 4 will have a friend or family member who will. So when I think of that statistic of 1 in 5, so if we counted off every 5th person, that would be a number of people in that room. But if the remaining 4 of us stand, it's all of us. So I know in this very room, there is someone that has a granddaughter that's struggling, or a sister or a friend or a neighbor. And so it's all of us. And it takes a community, not just a program, to care for people well and with excellence. And we're so privileged to partner with churches. 90% of who we see are coming from the church, and they're hiding. They're struggling with shame, with abandonment, with fear, all due to things that maybe have happened along the way in their life, choices that someone's made that has caused them great damage, trauma, and pain. Or perhaps it's choices they've made themselves, and again, they're in hiding. But they want hope, and so they're coming into the church looking for hope. And so we are partnering with the church and caring for those that are in the church, and those also that want to come, that know that everything we do is Christ-centered and holistic in our approach. So that includes nutrition, that includes fitness, that includes professional counseling, and everything is Christ-centered. So that's a lot of information. So we are going to talk today a little bit about, I'll do that after, a little bit about how we can do this together. And there's no greater way than figuring out how we can do this together than going to the Word of God. And so I'd like to share just a few thoughts that I've had over the years on the parable of the Good Samaritan that we've all read many, many times. And Nick, I'm sorry I had you do a slide in one version, but the last couple of days I've actually been reading it in the Passion Translation. So if you'll bear with me, I am going to read this from the Passion Translation, and then we're going to look at some thoughts that I had, some points where we can do this together. So this is Luke chapter 10, and we're going to pick it up in verse 25. And the heading on this particular translation says, Loving God, Loving Others. Just then a religious scholar stood before Jesus in order to test his doctrines. He posed the question, Teacher, what requirement must I fulfill if I want to live forever in heaven? Jesus replied, What does Moses teach us? What do you read in the law? The religious scholar answered, It states, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your passion, all your energy, and your every thought. And you must love your neighbor as well as yourself. Jesus said, That is correct. Now go and do exactly that, and you will live. Wanting to justify himself, he questioned Jesus further, saying, What do you mean by my neighbor? Jesus replied, Listen to what I tell you. There was once a Jewish man traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. When bandits robbed him along the way, they beat him severely, stripped him naked, and left him half dead. Soon a Jewish priest walked down the same way, the same road, and came upon him, the wounded man. Seeing him from a distance, the priest crossed to the other side of the road and walked right past him, not turning to help him one bit. And likewise crossed to the other side to pass by the wounded man without stopping to help him. Finally, another man, a Samaritan, came upon the bleeding man and was moved with tender compassion for him. He stooped down, gave him first aid, poured olive oil on his wounds, disinfected them with the wine, and bandaging them as to stop the bleeding. Lifting him up, he put him on his own donkey and brought him to an inn. Then he took him from the donkey and he carried him to the room for the night. The next morning, he took his own money from his wallet and gave it to the innkeeper with these words, "Take care of him, and I'll come back for my journey. If it costs any more than this, I will repay you when I return." So now tell me, which one of these men who saw the wounded man proved to be the true neighbor? The religious scholar responded, "The one who demonstrated kindness and mercy." Jesus said, "You must go and do the same." So some thoughts that I have on the Good Samaritan. Is what's the difference? When I look at the priest and the Levite, and I saw that they actually, all three of them saw him. They saw. But the Good Samaritan was actually moved by compassion. The other two were looking, they saw, and they were focused on themselves. What about me? What about me? What about the religious reasons why not to touch a dead body? Or perhaps it was, why did this man get himself into this situation? All kinds of thoughts, and they avoided him and they passed by. And yet the Good Samaritan, moved by compassion, saw him, saw his need, put his own needs aside, his own agenda aside, stooped over, cleansed him, gave him what he had, and put him on his donkey, and he took him to an inn. So what did he do? He drew near and he assessed the situation. He was motivated by compassion. And the priest and the Levite, what were their reasons? Maybe it was fear. I mean, I don't know. I can honestly say when I pore over this passage, I know myself over years. I've worked with youth for many years. I have my own story prior to coming to Christ at age 17. And there are times in my life where you just feel overwhelmed when someone crosses your path and they have a need. It feels way too big for you, or perhaps you're looking at that person and you think, well, that was a dumb choice. And then you get humbled and you make a dumb choice and you realize it's all of us. And so, maybe it's fear, maybe it's judgment, or maybe it's pride. Maybe in the positions they were in, the priest and the Levite, maybe it was like, oh, that's for someone else to do. That's beneath me. Who knows? And they may have even, it was known to be the bloody way, the place where this man was found. And so maybe they thought that the robbers would come back and they would be wounded themselves. So again, they're back to thinking of themselves. I guess we can all really relate to this, when we think about it, the times that we've done on behalf of Christ, we've cared for somebody really well, and then at times where we've maybe missed the mark. And that's the beauty of God and the beauty of this parable, because we get the beautiful opportunity to see how Jesus does it. We're all that broken person on the side of the road when Jesus comes and he cleans up our wounds, our sin, our stuff, and he carries us through life. He pays the price. He gives the innkeeper money. He paid the price for us so that we didn't have to carry that, and will until he comes back. So a practical thing that we can do is just like the Samaritan, meet the practical needs. Do what you can and enlist other people for what you can't. So the Samaritan, he gave his best. He gave oil and wine. Then include others. So I think, he realized what I love about the Good Samaritan was he had good boundaries. We all need good boundaries. And so he knew that he had a call and he had a place to go. And so he took him to an inn where he knew he could be cared for well in his absence. But the beauty of what the Samaritan did was he didn't just leave him and go on his way. He covered the cost, and he also said, I'll check back. And I think sometimes we forget about that. Someone crosses our path and we take them to a counselor or to a program and we forget about them. Maybe not forget about them, but the biggest thing that I see with the women that we have supported over the years is when someone checks back. So it wasn't just about doing something to get them to where they needed to go. It's relational, that I want to be involved with you. I want to know that you're cared for. And maybe it's only for a season. Maybe it's not for the whole journey. but we can all do our part. And that's what a circle of support looks like, or a community of support, is where we have others involved. And so if the innkeeper was Mercy Canada, or it was another program, the Good Samaritan showed that someone else can manage this care, and continued on and came back. And that's the beauty of having good boundaries. And also another practical thing is accountability for yourself. You know, checks and balances, especially if your spiritual gift is mercy. Sometimes you can get overly involved in someone's life out of a great godly given gift of tenderness and compassion. But that's where we need accountability and support for ourselves to know what our part is and what our part isn't. Because sometimes, unintentionally, we can step in and play Jesus to that person when Jesus is the person for that person. And so it's good to have accountability for ourselves when we're caring for people and doing it well. And checking our motives. Why are we caring for this person? Are we actually rescuing this person when they actually have resources inside them that we want to grow and develop and bring out of them so they can, in turn, care well for others? And we don't want to create dependencies when we're working with people. And sometimes we can unintentionally get involved in a crisis. And some people, if they've gone through a lot of trauma, sometimes people get uncomfortable when life gets healthy and well. And so crisis after crisis can actually make them feel normal. And if they can involve other people in it, then we all get wrapped into this circle. So if we're all accountable to one another in the caring of people, then that individual actually moves forward and their roots go down deeper. And they're at the more and more that they're on the journey with Jesus, and he brings that peace into their hearts and lives, and they get involved in community and grow and mature. We often find that so many of them are actually, they become the mentors of so many others because, you know, they have their past and they know where they've come from, but they know where they're going. And even though we've had some women, they come through the program and then another life circumstance will come along and they may struggle again for a short season, but they know what to do. And as soon as they get back up and get on that road again, they're dependent on Jesus and not on an individual. And I think the fifth point, which I've already touched on, is to know when to pass on the baton, know when your season has ended. And again, it's about developing and maintaining good boundaries. So once they're connected, the individual you're caring for in a healthy community, and they're involved in small groups and whatnot, maybe that's your time to step out now and to continue on with whatever God has called you to do. And then lastly, what if you are the neighbor? Right now you're not the neighbor. What if the time comes when you have been the good neighbor, but now you're struggling and you're in a crisis of yourself? I mean, the worst thing that we see is people start to hide and they start to withdraw and they start to be alone. And there's a difference between isolating and being alone in solitude. We all need solitude, that quiet time with God, where we're developing this relationship back and forth, where he's filling us, we're pouring out to him, he's filling us so that we can do this well in caring for other people. But what if there's a time something happens in your life and it's devastating and now it's you that needs care? Being willing to open up and to allow others into your struggle or into your pain is the best thing you can do so that, again, we can keep doing this in a healthy way. And I think just a couple of scriptures for me. I mean, James 1:27 says, "Pure and undefiled religion are this, to care for the widows and orphans in their distress, and to stay unstained from this world." And Micah 6:8 tells us how to live, and that's to stand for justice, to love mercy, and to walk in humility before God. And so I'll just leave those thoughts with you. And also, just bring your attention. We're gonna listen to, the best thing is a story, as Pastor Nick said to me, the highlight of the night was listening to the stories. So we're gonna listen to a story of Olivia who came through our program, just to bring a message of hope. There is hope, but hope and healing happens in Christ, with him at the center of it, with us around and walking it out. I will tell you though, in part of our growth now, even if someone doesn't need to come through the entire program, we have a variety of groups that are available for your communities, your friends, for anyone. And that includes, we have anxiety groups. So we have one for minors and we have one for adults. We have boundaries groups. We all need a brush up on boundaries now and then. And then we have one called Emotions in You. And what that is, that's learning about how to manage emotions. So there's a window of tolerance that we all have, and if we are not managing our emotions well, that's when people explode or don't behave properly, or when we shut down and we stuff them and we don't acknowledge them. So again, these are all Christ-centered. We bring Jesus into all of this. And our newest one is Processing Abuse Through Story. So we're going through biblical stories, and for those that we're seeing a huge rise in domestic abuse. And so helping people to understand what abuse is, what power and control looks like, and what the abuse cycle looks like, and it's all through biblical story. And then we have a parental support group. We are so thrilled to have that offered. We weren't able to do that when we had the residential program, and so now parents can come and when they're struggling and they need support. And we have a grief group, and we also have a training. So for those of you that are in your small group leaders or your pastors, we do an 8-hour training called Empower Training. And so that is a way for you to learn how to walk with people that are struggling, how to identify the signs and symptoms of people that are struggling, how to safeguard yourself in the process. And we kind of take a high-level overview of things like what Sarah was mentioning, eating disorders, self-harm, anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, whatever it is. We give you a high-level overview of that, and then we do some interactive work. And we take a look at the scriptures and at what point are some scriptures helpful and at what point are they not, and how to bring Jesus into caring for people. And lastly, we have our Keys to Freedom, which is not therapy, which is our 8-week intensive disciple study. And I believe you've already been doing that for a while. So we run them quarterly online, and we can also do groups tailored to you as well. So we would love to walk this journey with you and together, and give God the glory for healing. He is our counselor, our Prince of Peace, and our mighty Father. So that's what I have to share with you. And we'll just finish with this video of Olivia, and then Rochelle is here with me. She's my co-captain, and so we'll be out in the lobby afterwards. If you have any questions, we have some brochures for you, because there'll be somebody in your world that will probably cross your path even this week if they haven't already, that needs help, and we would love to be a part of that journey. It's such an honor to see these resilient women walking it out with Christ. So thank you.
Hi, my name's Olivia, and I came to Mercy back in June of 2020. At that point, I didn't think I was in a bad enough situation to need counseling, because I'd never done counseling before, and I thought it was for people who had terrible lives and all these horrible things had happened, which I found out later that, I'd gone through some not great things, and I needed a lot of healing, but I guess I'd never actually looked at my life and thought that it was in a place where I needed help. I thought, I'll be fine, it'll go away eventually, I'll get over it, whatever it is, I'll work through it. But I was at the point where I didn't want to do anything anymore, I didn't enjoy doing my regular activities, I was sleeping a lot, I wasn't enjoying life, I could barely make it through a day without breaking down in some capacity. And which at the time seems like it was really obvious, but at the time it was just so normal for me that I didn't think that it was anything out of the ordinary and needing help. I just thought that's what people did. Barely made it through the day and broke down all the time. I was having panic attacks and a lot of healing and pain in my growing up years with my birth parents that had been unresolved. Yeah, it was around the 3-month mark that I noticed things starting to shift myself. I noticed like my emotions, like my thoughts going on in my head, even physically. It was right from the beginning, my counselor picked out one of the lies that I'd been believing about myself, like very quickly, was that I didn't value myself. I thought I was worthless. Counselor was like, okay, so the lie is that I am worthless. I'm of no value, nobody loves me truly because nobody can see who I truly am. And then she asked me to replace it with the truth, or she asked me to talk to God and find the truth about that, like who I am, who He says I am. And I didn't like that because I didn't want to let Papa God into that. And I didn't want her to touch it either. And I didn't even want to touch it. I'm like, we're not going there because that's at the core, the root of who I am. And I don't think anybody can fix that. I was wrong, thankfully. But yeah, one of the statements that I remember that that my counselor asked me to speak over myself verbally out loud and in my head was that I am loved and I am worthy of love. That was the worthiness, that I'm worthy of love, I'm worthy of affection, I'm worthy of time, I'm worthy of fill in the blank. And it was so hard. It was, I think, like one of the most or second most difficult parts of the counseling journey was saying that simple sentence to myself. And it's kind of like the forgiveness, I realized afterwards. You say it first, and the emotions follow, the feeling follows. It's a declaration of truth that I didn't feel. And I'm like, I am loved, I'm valuable, I'm worthy. And I remember my counselor saying, I'm looking forward to the day when you say it and I can tell that you believe it. And I remember that when that day came. And it was great. Living this life that is good and wholesome and fulfilling. Like he says, he will give us life to the fullest. And I get it now. I get that scripture because I feel it. I live it every day. You know, it's not easy all the time, but I'm actually equipped with the ability to handle it now, you know, in a healthy way, in a way that doesn't take me out or take other people out. And I hold these tools now that I can help other people in my life. I share my experiences quite a bit with my friends and family. Like when they're going through things, I'm like, oh, I went through that. Like, this is what I did. These are things that I've learned. And I'm able to help people because of that. And I continue to grow with God every day. And again, it's not always easy because I'm rather stubborn, but He gets there. He gets me there every time, as I know He will. I want to give a big thank you to everyone who's supported Mercy over the years and continues to support Mercy because of you, I was able to go through this program and I didn't have to worry about the cost because counseling can be very expensive and it was such a blessing. And you are part of my story now. You were part of the reason why I'm here having a wonderful life with God, and that's partially because of you. So thank you.